Hey first grade families, it's Mrs. O'Hare and I'm here with chapter 5 of Dump the Chump. This is step number 4. The week that followed seemed to drag on forever. I thought Sunday would never come. All I could think about was my advertisement being in the Sunday paper and how it would look. Every few days, I pulled out my notebook and reread the 4th step of my plan. Show fake ad to parents. This was going to be a very important part of my operation. I had to make my parents believe that the ad in the paper had been written by the Hensons. So in my mind, I memorized all the things I might need to say to convince them. But as it turned out, it was easier than I thought. When Sunday finally came, I went down for breakfast, the same as usual. And of course, Robert was already at the table, gulping his juice like a slob. "Good morning, Mom and Dad," I said, sounding more cheerful than I had meant to sound. They both smiled. "Good morning, Dribble Puss," I mumbled to Robert. "Don't start," said my father. He gave me a look like he always does when he thinks a fight is about to break out. My mother had just started making pancakes, so the breakfast was going a little slow. It was very hard for me to sit there for so long and try and act normal. Inside, I was so nervous about my ad that I could hardly stand it. Robert started talking about how good his baseball team was doing. I wouldn't have minded quite so much if he hadn't kept saying how glad he was that he hadn't been placed on a stinko team like mine. "Will someone please tell Robert to shut up?" I asked nicely, but then I decided to do it myself. "If anyone knows anything about being stinko, it's you, Robert. You're so stinko, I can smell you from here." My father squinted his eyes at me and rustled his paper, but he didn't yell. He's not very good at yelling in the morning. He's too interested in the paper. At our house, my mother is the one who's in charge of morning yelling. "If I hear one more stinko," she said, "both of you are going to leave this table without breakfast." I know my mom well enough to know that she meant what she said, so I decided to be quiet. Robert wasn't as smart. After a couple minutes, I heard him whisper, "Stinko, stinko," one more time. I think he only did it to see if my mom meant business. She did. Robert left the table immediately. After the pancakes were served, I ate my breakfast in silence. The whole time I was eating, I watched my father as he read the paper. My heart was pounding. I knew that my ad was somewhere in that very paper. After I finished eating, I left the table and casually asked my father if I could take the paper up to my room to read. "What's all this sudden interest in reading the paper?" my mother asked. "Is this an assignment for school or something?" "No," I answered, trying to act cool about it. "I just figure if I'm getting older now and I should know more about the world and what's happening." Boy, were my parents ever impressed with that one. They practically shoved the newspaper at me. "Well, good for you," said my father. "This must mean you're finally growing up." Have you ever noticed when you do something that your parents think is good, they've decided you finally started growing up? Don't they ever think that you can just be good and still be a kid? After he handed me the paper, I went up to my room. Quickly, I turned to the classified ads. There must have been about 1,000,000 ads in the paper that day. I had a very hard time finding the ad I had written, but finally, after about 30 minutes, I spotted the personals at the bottom of page 6, and there it was. "Wanted, nice boy, to live with old couple. Call 555-3447. I checked it carefully to make sure it was exactly right. Perfect. Even the phone number was just the way I had written it. Naturally, I wasn't going to use the Hensons' real phone number. I didn't want any weirdos calling and asking them about their home. So when I wrote the ad, I changed the last number. The Hensons' real number is 555-3446. But in the ad, I put 555-3447. Brilliant, huh? I wondered what the poor people with the 3447 number would think of a bunch of stray boys if a bunch of stray boys started calling. I stayed in my room for a few more minutes, just staring at my ad. But finally, I knew it was time to carry out step number 4. So I took a few deep breaths, braced myself, and headed back downstairs. My parents were still in the kitchen having their 50th cup of coffee. "Mom, take a look at what I found in the newspaper," I said excitedly as I sat back down on the table. I opened the paper to the classified ad section. "Look at what?" she asked, coming over to see what I was so interested in. Well, I was just looking through the ads to see if there were any cheap stuff for sale, and I found this. I pointed. I held out the ad for her to see, and she read it out loud. "Wanted. Nice boy to live with old couple." She looked at me and said, "So what?" "So what?" I asked. "So don't you remember what I told you about you-know-who's down the street?" I asked. When my father heard me say you-know-who's, he looked up. "What in the world are you two talking about?" he asked. He sounded a little bit hurt. Sometimes I think I tell my father more. Sometimes I think I should tell my father more secrets, so he'll feel like part of the family. My mother filled him in on all the things I had told her about the Hensons. Then, together, they took a closer look at my ad. They reread it several times. "Oh, those poor little old people," said my mother. "I just feel so sorry for them. Imagine having to advertise for a boy to come and live with them. How sad." "Wait a minute," said my father. "We don't even know for sure that the Hensons placed this ad. Maybe it's just an ad for some other older couple." I knew my father would say something like that. He always doubts everything. But I was ready. "Why don't you just check the telephone number? If it's the Hensons' number, then it'll prove it." My mother got the phone book and looked up the Hensons' number, and then she checked it against the ad. "Well," said my father. "Oh dear," said my mother. "It's the Hensons' number, all right. It looks like the paper made a mistake and printed a 7 instead of a 6. But all the other numbers are the same. I'm sure the Hensons must have placed this ad." My parents talked about how sad this was for a few more minutes. I decided that if I didn't get out of here, I was going to burst with excitement. "Well, I'll see you guys later," I said. "I think I'll go over to Tommy's and see if he's home from church." And then I backed out the door, ran around into the front yard. I'm sure the smile on my face was so big you could have seen it a mile away. Step number 4 was over, and all was well. I'll read again tomorrow, and this time I really will. Thank you. I miss you.